Hello, welcome to the notes, the video notes for lesson 5-6. This begins on page 30 in your notes packet. And this lesson is about initial value. And we've actually already talked about this and learned a little bit about this. The target for this is I can identify the initial value of a linear function and state its meaning. So up till now we've been focusing on the slope or the rate of change. Now we're going to focus on the initial value and what does that mean. So let's read a little bit more about this. Initial value, not only do we want to know how a linear function behaves in terms of its rate of change, like I said, we've already talked about that, but we also want to know where a linear function starts initially. So where does it begin? And this is not always true. It doesn't always begin at this point. But this next part might make a little more sense. That means, what is the value of the linear function at the input of 0? Now that's the key. So when we're talking about an input of 0, that's when x equals 0. And then we call this the initial value. You've heard me mention this before as the y-intercept. Y-intercept. The initial value, when the input is 0, what is the y value? Alright, so we have an example that we saw before in the previous lesson. The graph shows results of a plant growing contest among 3 friends at a local plant club. Never heard of such a thing before, but let's just pretend this really does exist. The point 0.04 is the initial value for friend 1. What does this point represent? Alright, so friend 1 is right here. I'm going to use purple for it. That's the initial value. That's when the input is 0, when x is 0. What does this point represent? Well, the y value is 4. So what that means is friend 1, or friend 1's plant, was 4 inches tall when the contest began. Alright, so the plant didn't start as a seed, it didn't start at 0, it started at 4 inches tall. The point 0.06 is the initial value for friend 2. So I'm going to switch to red here. So we're talking about right here. What does this point represent? Again, the input value is 0. The y value is something else. It's not 0 also. So what does it represent? Friend 2's plant was 6 inches tall when the contest began. And then we have one more. The point 0.02 is the initial value for friend 3. That's right here. What does this point represent? I'm sure you've probably already figured this out. Now we're talking about friend 3, and friend 3's plant starts out, or was, 2 inches tall when the contest began, or at the beginning of the contest. Alright, pretty simple. The initial value when the input value is 0. Okay? Alright, we're going to take a look at a couple more examples to help you understand this a little bit better. So we're going to turn over to page 31. And the first one, again, we've seen this example before when we were finding the rate or the slope. Your friend borrows $200 from her parents. The graph shows how much money she owes her parents. What is the initial value? What does the initial value represent? All right, so we're finding two things, the initial value and what it represents. So I'm going to put a box around those two questions. Okay, the initial value is, remember, when the input is 0. So I'm going to go over here, and you know what, sometimes the output is going to be 0, but in this case it's not, it's right here, it's 200. So if we think about the x and the y axis and what they stand for, the x is the weeks, and the y value is the money, right? Weeks and money. So that's going to help us answer the second part. What does the initial value represent? So the my friend, your friend, my friend, or you can say your friend, owed her parents $200 at week 0. Alright, pretty simple. I think this will make a lot of sense. And then we have one more example. It's the graph below. It models the amount of snow that falls during a snowstorm. Great time of the year to be answering a question like this. Let me switch up the color here. There's some red. Alright, what is the initial value? What does it represent? So, initial value first, and then we want to know what does it represent. So first let's find the initial value. Now, since it doesn't start at the origin, it's not going to be 0, 0. It starts right there. The output value is 3. So, what does it represent? Well, the X stands for hours, and the Y stands for inches, or the snow height. So, what does it represent? It means that there was, or there is, 3 inches of snow on the ground when the storm began. Or when the storm started. And then in parentheses, I'm just going to point out that it's 0 hours. Okay? What is the rate of the snowfall, and what does it mean? So for this, I'm going to find the slope. So the change in y is +1. The change in x is +2. So change in y over change in x, and we're all experts at that now, is 1/2. What does that mean? It means 1 inch of snow every 2 hours. Now there's actually another way you can think of this. You can think of it as 0.5 or 1/2 of an inch of snow for every hour. That's the unit rate. either of those is true. Alright? So that's it for this lesson. Pretty short and sweet. Hopefully it's easy for you to understand. If you have any questions, make sure you come and see me for help. Good luck, and we'll see you in math.